regard to the second coming. In fact, if I ponder the situation about the return of Christ, I have some questions myself. And reading the things, passage from Peter, and reading about the heavens and earth melting, passing away, and just with a great noise and a fervent heat, I have a question in regard to where are we going to be when these things happen? Where will we be when these things happen? Now I know, if I'm thinking correct, that this would be after the great white throne judgment. And if it's after the great white throne judgment, then both resurrections have taken place. So I don't know. That's what is in my mind that I believe, based upon the teaching in the Bible. Unless I'm looking at it totally wrong. I could be, but I don't think that I am. And I believe that these are things that people have in their mind. And the question always resounds is how long is it going to be? How much longer is it going to be? What really bothers me is the thought from Isaiah's vision and the conversation that he has with the Lord in regard to the conditions that were present in Israel prior to the Babylonian captivity, and the things that God is saying about his people certainly had application there. And I'd like to take the liberty to draw some of those thoughts out and draw them away from the nation of Israel and make application to our nation today and to our time in which we live. And it makes me wonder and understand that these things that are happening are things that God has described of long ago. And what he was talking about was the Babylonian captivity of 70 years, and Isaiah was just a prelude to that. His time in ministry was just before the Babylonian captivity. Now, I don't know how much time there is left before the second return of Christ, but I do know that in the perilous times in which we live is that we have been saying for a long time and have been preaching that the return of the Lord is imminent. In fact, when you look at the writings of the New Testament, many of those people believed that Jesus' return was going to be before their life was ending upon this earth. And I have met people who have felt that way. I had a great aunt on my father's side who believed that she would be alive, and this was back in the 60s, that she would, and she was already 80, she was in the 60s saying that it had been revealed to her that she would be alive when the Lord came. Well, unfortunately, she has passed on. Her tombstone and her grave and her body are still there, but the Lord hasn't come yet. And I certainly don't believe in the AD 70 theory that that was when Jesus came in the second coming. There's just too many faults with that. So I think that what we are hearing in America, especially in our generation, since we've had an election just this last year in 2020, is that the voice of a lot of politicians is making promises. And it reminds me of a couple of verses over in the book of Jude, where it just simply says these words in verse 10 through verse 13. In Jude it says, "But these men revile the things which they do not understand, and the things which they know by instinct, like unreasoning animals. By these things they are destroyed. Woe to them, for they have gone the way of Cain, and for pay they have rushed headlong into the error of Balaam and perished in the rebellion of Korah. These men are those who are hidden reefs in your love feast when they feast with you without fear, caring for themselves. Clouds without water, carried along by winds, autumn trees without fruit, doubly dead, uprooted." I think that's just the way that the generation that we're living in is like. That these people are just clouds without water. But oh, can they spill it forth from their mouth. They can paint beautiful pictures. And what's the price tag? Well, last I heard, at least $6 trillion. Oh, pennies. That's just pennies. After all, I mean, look at the debt of America. Last time I saw it, it was over $28 trillion. And when they have this moving clock, it's spinning so fast, working its way back to the 28 to go to 29 to 30. I just don't understand how we can do the things that we're doing. In Revelation, the fall of Babylon takes place in one day. In 1929, the stock market crashed in one day. People took their lives because they had lost everything. I believe that it can happen again, and the things of materialism that we have considered so important and on which we hope for our future and our security can be quickly gone, just disappear with that, and it's gone. Like the days of Noah, they knew not until the flood came and took them away. 4 thoughts are key to our understanding of this passage. How long? How much longer? First of all, with God, time is nothing. 1 day is with the Lord 1,000 years, 1,000 years as a day. Now, if you turn back over into the book of Genesis in the 15th chapter, you'll find where God had a conversation with Abram in regard to his future and his descendants. And I thought it was very interesting how that he put things in context in regard to it. But when you think about what he was saying there in the 15th chapter, he said to Abraham, "Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." And then he promised to him that he would have a descendants like the stars of the sky without multitude, as sand of the seashore without number. And at that point, Abraham had no descendant from his body. But God promised him that he would do this. And then what God says to him, which really strikes at the heart of it so much, in verse 13. And God said to Abram, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. Abram, you're going to be dead, long gone, before your descendants are like the stars, or like the sand. Your descendants are going to go down into a foreign country, which was Egypt. And they were there, as the Bible later says, 430 years to the day. They were there in captivity. I don't think that sometimes we really take that to heart. But God, with him, time is nothing. But with us, it's everything. Because I live in a fleshly body, and my days are numbered. And I know that our days are all numbered, and we just simply have no concept sometimes how that God doesn't really worry about time because it doesn't bother him at all. 1 day, another day, a year, a decade, a century, a millennium. All of these things with God. And I mean, if you think of God existing, pre-existing, eternal God, there is no time element that he is bound by. He just simply is that way. Now, from the promises of Genesis 3:15 till the coming of Jesus into the world, how long was that? Well, we could say almost 4,000 years anyway, at least. From the time of Genesis in the Garden of Eden, 4,000 years passed. How many generations lived and died? How many people were a part of that will of God as they progressed through time, living and dying, and seeing nothing? But it tells us in Hebrews 11:13, they died in faith, not having received the promises, but they saw them afar off. They embraced them, confessed they were strangers and pilgrims. Listen, that's the same thing with us. My great aunt, who thought that she would be alive when the Lord came, I'm sure she also felt that the Lord would come someday, and he will come as it is promised by God, and that he will take us home to be with him. Now, I don't know when that's going to be, how long it will be, or how much longer will we have to wait. But it really doesn't matter with God's point of view, but oh, how I do care about it. From the establishment of the church on the day of Pentecost till the time that we're living today, at least about 2,000 years. And so how much longer? And Peter says the time will come that scoffers will mock and say, where's the promise of his coming? But God has promised, and he will fulfill it. And as the angels stood there at the ascension and told the apostles standing there, this Jesus whom you see going up into heaven in the clouds will return in like manner. And Revelation 1 says, every eye shall see him. Behold, he cometh with clouds. So time is nothing, and we need to think of that, even with the sense of urgency. God is the one who's in charge, and time is nothing. Second thing is that Isaiah teaches us that time with God is everything. Time with God is everything. How often do we have time with God? Well, exactly as I read from 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, verses 16 to 18, is that we see things spiritually. We see things not physical. And the natural man does not understand the spiritual things, but the spiritual person does understand it. So when we come here this morning to worship in spirit and truth, how many of our experiences this morning do you see the Lord? Now, I haven't seen him yet, visibly, but I have seen him spiritually. And I have communed with him. And I have sang hymns of praises to my God. I have extolled his virtues and praised his name. I have heard prayers offered, and I have prayed, lifting up the name of God in glorification and praying for us that we might see and understand his will for our lives. So from everything that we have done when we walked into this building, it isn't about who you've seen who is here, although that's a part of what our fellowship is, shaking hands, maybe giving a hug someday, we can do that again. But all the things that we do and say are basically in a spiritual sense. So we are here from the opening prelude to the closing chorus. It's all about our encounter with God. Just focus on the presence of the Lord. And do you sense the two most important things that Isaiah talked about in his conversation with God? He said, first of all, I am a man of unclean lips. I see myself like I really am. I'm not going to be as stupid as some people are. And you say, well, how stupid are some people? Well, I'm not.
That's a good
Yeah. I'm not going to be like the publican who prayed in Luke 18. I thank God that I'm not like other people. I'm not like this like this sinner. I'm not like this, or I fast and I tithe and I do this. I want to toot my horn. Listen, that is stupid. Do not praise yourself. I am a man of unclean lips. There is no one of us who have come here that hasn't needed something in our lives. We need help. And if we don't need help, we sure know somebody who does need help. And we pray for these people and we lift up their names, but we want to be aware of what people's needs are. And the second thing that Isaiah learned, he said, I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. Have you ever lived in a time that you have thought, how bad could it get? Could it get any worse than what it is? Well, I don't know how bad it was in the days of the flood, but it had to be pretty bad for God to destroy the world except 8 people. I don't know how bad it was in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, but it was so evil that God overthrew the 4 cities of the plain like a circle. Admah, Zeboam, Sodom, Gomorrah. Fire and brimstone destroyed them. And they're there as an example for our day and time. And you look at our world today and you see all of the unrest, the civil strife, and everything that's going on. And what is it that we find? Idolatry, materialism, anything and everything imaginable. We find ourselves like Paul in the city of Athens. His heart was stirred when he saw all of the idolatry. Our heart should be stirred when we hear the language of people, when the things that they spout about abortion rights, when they spout about transgenderism, when they spout about all of the things that they do as if it is a God-given right, it is acceptable before the Lord, when you and I know that it is an abomination in the sight of God. We live in the midst of a people of unclean lips. Now, Isaiah found cleansing with the coal taken from the altar. And some people say, well, you know, I've been baptized and I have a certificate. Big deal. A certificate that you've been baptized is worthless unless you've had a change in your heart. Until you experience the reality of Christ within your heart and your life, I just say you weren't held under the water long enough. And when the bubbles stop, and then wait a minute, then maybe we can bring you up. You want to change. Listen, don't be like the church at Sardis, Revelation, the 3rd chapter, verses 1 to 4. What did it say? You have a name that you live, but you're dead. And if Jesus could say that, he could say that about a lot of our liberal churches and a lot of denominational bodies of Christ, and he could probably say that about some of the people who claim to be Christians in our group of people as well. You have a name that you live, but you're dead because your heart hasn't really been changed. Now, that's exactly what Isaiah is talking about. But one thing is certain, you can't do what is necessary if you aren't here. So I ask, where are these missing people today? Where are these missing people? I mean, we can pull out that roll. I don't know where it's at right now. I've seen it in my office, and I've seen it in other places. But I know people who are members of this church. They're not going anywhere. They're home. And what bothers me most is that you'll find all types of excuses for those who are not here. Now, some are justified, I do believe. Sickness. People in the hospital. I have not been able to heal them and say, take up your bed and go to church today. And so we're waiting upon the healing process for those people to be returned, and I know that they will. They are faithful people. And there are people who are shut-ins and not able to be out because of health and age. And there are people who have to work, but not those who choose to work today. There's a difference. I've got to work. Okay, you're a healthcare provider. But I didn't volunteer to work today. This is the Lord's day, and I can be here, and there's no excuse for me not to be here when I just simply don't choose to be here. What does it profit you if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? What would a man give in exchange for his soul? So thirdly, this is what we need. These people are not the easiest people to preach to today. There are people who are like that first group. They're like water on a duck's back. The duck has such oil in its feathers that you could pour a gallon or a bucket or a tub of water on a duck's back, and it would look, when it ran out, like there was nothing that was there at all. Nothing touched his back. Water on a duck's back. I remember talking to a person who was like that. I had prayer with that individual, and while I was praying, he was watching television. Now, how did I know? I risked one eye. I thought, well, I'll just see if you're really intense. I mean, he wouldn't turn the television off, but he wanted to just watch television while I was praying. So I thought, my goodness, that's people that just like Isaiah is talking about. And there are those who have no sense of the spiritual side of man. They have no sense. 1 Corinthians 2:14. The spiritual side, the spiritual things, like the man who saw the communion table and read the inscription across the front of it in remembrance of me. Honest, true story. My dad told it to me. He was there. And the man looked at it and said, well, somebody donated that communion table. They just didn't put his name on it. In remembrance of me. Now, this guy was at church every Sunday. But that's in the days of the old country church when people were sometimes not so smart as they should be. And sometimes there are people still that way. They should know things. They should know better. Why, somebody donated that in remembrance of me. I knew the man personally. Yeah, I sure did. The final thing is, here is what worries me most of all. Verse 11. It says cities are devastated. How many cities have been burned last year and this year? How many fires have you seen set by rioters who are peacefully demonstrating? Even behind the reporters who say, this is a peaceful demonstration and the flames are shooting up. The cities are devastated. How many people have houses that are empty and destroyed and businesses that were basically wiped out? We're living in a time that the cities are devastated. Cities are becoming desolate. Look at the people living in filth and the sewage that's on the streets in the cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles and big cities where the homeless people have no place to live except in tents on sidewalks. The cities are just devastated. Houses are empty. It's just unthinkable, unconscionable that veterans of America who have served in our armed forces have to live in the places that they do. And homeless people. They'd be under a street, under a bridge on a freeway. They live in cardboard boxes in the wintertime. They just simply make their way. They're people without aim, without direction, who have need, and sometimes they really don't want your help because they have been institutionalized. And that was a remark that I learned out of the movie. If I learned it out of the movie, I should remember the name of the movie.
Catch-22?
Nope.
Is it newer or older?
Oh, it's older. Morgan Freeman, Tim Robbins.
Shawshank.
Shawshank Redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Shawshank Redemption. Mm-hmm. And the old boy finally, he got out. He was so old. But he had become institutionalized. He couldn't live outside of prison, even though he had a job and a place to live. And so he just simply took his life. He was institutionalized. And I believe that there are people who are institutionalized today. I mean, if you gave them a place to live, clean, and the linens and beds and food, is they would take it and go to the underpass. They would go to a camp. They would go and live on the streets or in the fields. They are just institutionalized. We can only do something when we change their viewpoint, and that requires a ministry on our part to reach the very heart of it. And then I see what it says, the Lord has removed men far away. Did you ever see so many people being moved by migration? How many boys and girls from Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala have come up through the corridor of Mexico to come into the United States? The crisis at the border, thousands, hundreds of thousands, people, kids crammed together in little spaces. The Lord has removed men far away. And people from everywhere in the world are on the move. If it's not to come to America, it's try to go to a better place to live. And so that's what makes me think, and that's what makes me ask the question, why people are leaving the city of New York to go to Florida. They're sick and tired of how things are there in their city. It's devastated, it's problems, and it makes me ask, how much longer will it be? How much longer will it be before God says, I may die before it happens. You may die. All of us may die. Because Abraham, you've got to live for 430 years, and there's no way, buddy, that you're going to make it to 175, which you did. And you had a good life, full life, and a rich life, but you didn't live to see all the things that God provided. But I'll guarantee you this, that Abraham died in faith, and I'll guarantee that if I die before the Lord comes, I will die in faith, believing that God is going to send Jesus and bring an end to all of this squalor, all of this sin, all of this crime, and all this world's sufferings, and it will come to an end. How long? I don't know. But how much longer? I believe we are in the last days. But I've been preaching that for 60 years. I'm in my 61st year of preaching. But I've been preaching that. But with me, time is everything. And with God, time is nothing. But He has it in His hand. And He will work it out. Now, what can you do? And what will you do? And what are you going to do this week? If you can't be here on Wednesday night, then sign up to pray at home. I challenge you. If you can travel, Thursday is the National Day of Prayer at Shepherdsville at 12 noon in the city park. And if you can't be here and you can't be there, for goodness sakes, be somewhere and pray to God. The question is, have we been to Calvary? Have we seen Jesus on the cross? Have we had a vision like Isaiah did of the Lord high and holy in His temple? And God wants us to be involved. Here am I, Isaiah said, send me. Our invitation this morning is just simple. One little verse, one little song, one little chorus we've sang before using its closing, but now I want to use it for invitation. Lord, lay some soul upon my heart and love that soul through me. And may I nobly do my part to win that soul for thee.
Amen.
You can't say it any better than that. And that's exactly what Isaiah is learning. I dwell in the midst of a people who need Jesus. Lay some soul upon my heart. Let's be standing in the same